Climate change is a global issue. Whether you live in New York or Nepal, Berlin or Bangalore, Tianjin or Tauranga, we're all in this together. The profile of emissions in different places may be very different, but there's a common theme. The world over, we are not doing enough to curb our emissions, and the planet is getting warmer. The impact of our warming climate is being felt around the globe, and sadly, those most vulnerable are feeling its effects first. As a global society, we simply must do better. Greenhouse gases don't care about national boundaries, and nor must our endeavours to find solutions. Sharing technology and knowledge will be critical to our success in migrating to a low-carbon future. An example of two nations with very different emissions profiles are China and New Zealand. In 2019, 44% of China's emissions came from electricity generation, while in New Zealand a similar proportion of 48% was attributed to agriculture. These nations are both embracing carbon markets to manage their emissions, but they're using them in very different ways. China's national carbon market is currently focused solely on electricity generation, while New Zealand's national carbon market, also known as the Emissions Trading Scheme or ETS, captures everything except the emissions-heavy agriculture industry. So what exactly is a carbon market? Well, in a nutshell, carbon markets are trading systems in which carbon credits are sold and bought. One tradable carbon credit equals 1 tonne of carbon dioxide, or the equivalent amount of a different greenhouse gas, reduced, sequestered, or avoided. And what impacts will carbon markets have on you? Well, the objective of a carbon market is to change behaviour. It achieves this by passing the cost of carbon on to consumers, thus making products and services that are emissions intensive more expensive and incentivising investment in more sustainable alternatives. In China, as the price of carbon increases, so will costs associated with non-renewable energy. The flow-on effect of this will be higher electricity costs, and this will likely stimulate even more investment in clean energy, as generators seek to avoid these costs to gain competitive advantage. In New Zealand, the increasing cost of carbon is already starting to be felt. This was highlighted in a recent article in the mainstream news which identified both Genesis and Contact Energy customers seeing their gas bills rise by 11% on the back of an annual 48% increase in the cost of carbon. As I touched on earlier, the sharing of technology and knowledge across national boundaries will be imperative if we are to tackle climate change. So what can New Zealand and China learn from each other? Well, one example would be the sharing of renewable energy solutions. China is already a world leader in this space, and investment in this area is anticipated to further accelerate once its price of carbon starts to appreciate. New Zealand's economy is extremely reliant on agriculture, and while this industry is not currently part of its national carbon market, the government has announced that emissions from agriculture are poised to be priced. There is a lot riding on New Zealand finding effective ways to manage and mitigate emissions from agriculture, which will likely see them become a world leader in this space. Learnings from this industry could also be useful for China to apply to reduce emissions from their agriculture sector, the emissions from which are not currently priced. It's important for New Zealanders to be aware of efforts and sacrifices being made in large nations like China, as there is often a feeling of being too small to make a difference. Building networks and communications that enable individuals to share their efforts with their global brothers and sisters will be important so that we can all feel like we're working on solving these issues together. Nā ku te roro, no te roro, ka ora ai te iwi. With your basket and my basket, the people will live.